tulisoma naye huko Jerumani. Kaka yake mkubwa Mburu Miano ndiye alinikaribisha nikiwa mtoto mdogo huko Jerumani. Yeye vile vile alisoma uhandisi.
Ni mtu ambaye hakuna mtu anasema alikuwa lecturer yake. Ni mtu ambaye hajulikani alisomea university gani.
Former Prime Minister Raila Odinga in his rightful place as a Kenyan. If he has offered himself for an international job, the people of Kenya are obligated to support Raila Odinga as a Kenyan. He's not going to the AU as leader of ODM.
There can be no better person to take the chairmanship of the African Union other than Raila Odinga.
I'm inclined to accept the challenge. Should the leadership of Africa want my services, I am ready.
Na yeye atapata kazi ngumu na tena kazi kubwa. Tumshangilie na tumuombee apate hiyo kazi.
We have decided to put our foot down and support Raila Odinga from the sky, on the land, in the sea, whichever place and whatever avenue that we may be having. We will put our resources to support the candidature of Raila Amolo Odinga.
As ODM and as the larger family of Azimio, we actually release Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga to go to serve the whole of Africa.
Raila Odinga, we want to congratulate you, sir. We will support you as MPs for you to be the AU boss.
This is truly the Kenya that we want. Putting Kenya first.
Yule mzee ni mchoraji. Amechora kila kitu. Raila's stature and position in Africa is well documented and known.
He's got the expertise, he's got the knowledge.
He has the capacity, he has the competence to take up that leadership.
And Africa is only going to be richer with Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga.
Kuna atafungua njia nyingi za kusaidia wabunge, za kusaidia watu wa Kenya.
But that does not affect the position of ODM.
Ruto amepanga Raila bila hata damu kumwagika Kenya hii. Amemtoa kwa siasa. Raila ameenda kuretire. Raila ametoka siasa akienda AU kama chairman atafanya siasa kweli.
It is known by everybody that Raila is ODM and ODM is Raila. And that in the absence of Raila Odinga, ODM will definitely collapse.
Ruto si amepanga tu Raila mchana tukiona.
ODM ni chama kubwa. Na Raila aende AU, aende EU, aende ECOWAS, aende Somalia, aende Ethiopia, yeye ndo bado atabaki kiongozi yetu hapa Kenya.
Raila is the institutional structure upon which ODM stands.
Amechora vile atakuwa AU, vile atakuwa ODM na vile Kenya itaendelea. Amechora yote.
The other time unasikia mtu ya West Africa mwenye anatoka saizi anaitwa Mohammed from Mali, from Niger. Juzi kulikuwa na jamaa anatoka Guinea. Why doesn't a Kenyan lead the continental body?
All right, and here is a CV. All right, they stopped my reggae, and no one will stop my AU ambition. The CV expert in Maandamano, that is what was captured by Steno also earlier as well. Vacuum, what vacuum? Right, everyone is talking about that vacuum that will be there. Azimio, One Kenya, this is the big shoes that he will be leaving as well. And we'll try and see. You can see, is he double-faced? You can see the president is rolling out the red carpet for Raila Odinga to join the AU Commission chairmanship. And he's torn in between, looking at the road to AU chairmanship and also leaving behind politics. Where is he at as far as this is concerned? And the rest to fill Raila's shoes is on as well. And you can see there the tape measure with some of very stocky legs and very skinny legs as well, which wants to fill the shoes of Raila Odinga as far as politics is concerned. And today also, we have the housing levy that is being cramped down the Parliament's building. We can see it's gone through the second reading as it is right now. Those are some of the editorial cartoons that we have in the publications today. Right, back to our discussion this morning. We continue apace with that race for the AU chairmanship. And we want just to get some maybe broaden our knowledge on the prospects of the candidates that we do have. Are we also just fronting Raila Odinga as the main candidate, all the others? Because we've heard also from some of the legislators that also Uhuru Kenyatta should be there, and other candidates that maybe they are unbeknownst to me, and you may be knowing, you can tell us more. And within the East African region, who is Raila pitting against? Hassan Kaneje.
Yeah, Dipal, not aware of what other countries have fronted so far, and if they have, then it's not exactly an issue of public knowledge.
Somalia is not on this particular race as well. I thought Somalia is. Djibouti is, and Tanzania.
So it's not officially.
No, not officially.
Yeah, because officially
even Kenya is not official.
Yeah, so to that extent, I cannot confirm that with certainty. However, Kenya has certain advantages, for instance, over Tanzania. The fact that Tanzania has been there, Salim Ahmed, about 30 years ago, and Kenya hasn't had that seat. But just as we undertook the campaign for the United Nations Security Council, seat, if the country is serious and committed to this cause, of course they're going to get that. They're going to increase the likelihood of getting that position. Now, what is going to be important is to move from the noises in the political rallies to action. And, passion has never been a substitute, for sound strategy. And that is, I think, the direction we need to move to. Of course, I think in the coming months, you're likely perhaps to see even other East African countries expressing interest. And they're going to express interest, especially when we look confused, when we don't look organized, or when we just seem to be making noise without some strategy. There is need for us to start reaching out, first of all, to East Africa, itself, trying to do much like, what we were doing in shadow diplomacy before COVID broke out, when we were campaigning for the United Nations Security Council non-permanent seat. And so what's going to determine, I think, the direction is, are we prepared to now stop making noise? Remember, these are just the beginning of the stages, so we can't exactly blame people for not having a strategy right now. But we need to recognize that perhaps we need to start doing more and talking less. And yes, there seem to be a general consensus, at least among the key political players in the country, that, for instance, Raila Odinga should be the one to be going for it. Of course, there's a chance that other Kenyans may be interested in it, and there are sections of Kenyans that perhaps believe other people may be, also qualified to do. And there are many Kenyans, who can be able to do that job. But of course, as we understand, the support of a nation is critical in giving you the kind of gravitas. But also your personal credentials are important. And so when you start doing that, even the number of Kenyans who can vie for that seat becomes actually smaller. From academic qualifications, there are many. There are probably, hundreds of, if not thousands. But from the political perspective, then that number is going to get, a lot smaller. And so what we shouldn't worry so much about, for instance, the potential of other people coming up from the region, is what strategy are we putting in place, number one, to make sure that we can be able to deal with whatever competition that may come, but number two, that we are ahead of the game so that we don't react to what other people are doing. Because the challenge is the moment, if Tanzania or Uganda or Djibouti, they are able to start mobilizing support, ahead of us, then it may become some kind of a challenge. Now, the reason why we have to do a strategy in East Africa first is because we need some consensus that is going to be endorsed by the African Union, because they're looking at us, and since we're looking for a candidate from East Africa, we need to start doing diplomacy at home, then before we can actually go continentally. And so, for me, I'll be less concerned about which other country in East Africa is going to front somebody, and I'll be more concerned about what strategy do I have to ensure that I'm actually going to stay ahead of the game. We run marathons. We don't worry about who is running in Sweden. We run based on the fact that we want to run maybe under 2 hours, and we know if we're going to run under 2 hours, no one is going to beat us. And that is the kind of attitude we should approach.
Mm-hmm. So one is want to ask what or how exceedingly beneficial is Kenya gaining from this particular, of course, position? And why should we really rally behind Raila Odinga, or whichever candidate might come forth after Raila Odinga as well? So what are the benefits for us as a country? Why should we be particularly concerned about it and intent?
Yeah, Dibal, one of the most important benefits if a Kenyan is occupying that position is a chair of the Africa Union is prestige. In diplomacy, in politics, that you are having a Kenyan there flying the African flag, not just around Africa, but globally. Remember, it's when they are meeting of the G20, G7, World Economic Forum, the Africa Union chairperson attends those meetings. And in fact, the Africa Union is now the 21st member of the G20.
Yes.
So when you have a Kenyan there, it doesn't matter which Kenyan, but it's Kenyan flag that we are going to be seeing there, something that lacks now. Number two, if you look at the way the global geopolitical dynamics are shaping up right now, Kenya is lagging behind. You can see South Africa is hogging the limelight with the positions that it's taking. The fact that it went to the ICC and took Israel
ICJ.
to the ICJ. South Africa is, if today there was going to be a 6th permanent member of the Security Council, I think countries will elect South Africa to that position. Of course, there'll be pushback from the West. So South Africa has done that and is very strategic. There'll be a lot of pushback, of course, on South Africa, but South Africa is seen as that a liberator and the harbinger of liberation movements. And Kenya has not done much of this international outreach like South Africa is doing, and a few other countries in Africa. So having a Kenyan there, I think, may reclaim that lost space that Kenya hasn't gone to. And lastly, an Africa Union chairperson provides Kenya with a diplomatic space, table, platform to actually carry its weight through that particular office, even though that person is serving the Africa Union across the world. And that is why it's very important for Kenya to push for this position. Now, what I'm seeing though is, rallies in Sokomjinga, to discuss Africa Union chairmanship, these things are done in the boardroom. Professor Kagwanja knows this, Dr. Kanenje knows this. When Kenya was gunning for the Security Council seat, they are not done in the rallies, and we need a strategy. Politicians are going to spoil this thing.
But of course, you can't, uncouple ourselves to the reality that also this is a political issue.
This is our undoing, this is our undoing. In fact, we wallow in tribal sycophants, even in this Africa Union
he wins some, he loses some. So that is now, the opportunity cost that you pay. If you're going for this position, it means also your political career, somehow you're putting it on the chopping block. And also you need to handle your political side of it.
Raila will have to do that. He'll have to put his political...
So the Sokomjinga has to come into play, and then you also have to have the boardrooms as well.
It does not help in getting that position. That's what I'm saying. The Sokomjinga politics does not help Raila Odinga in getting that position. It is going to be in the boardrooms. It is going to Kigali, going to Pretoria, going to Ethiopia, going to Dar es Salaam to actually... This is why we are saying Kenya needs a holistic strategy to push its candidate. Whoever that candidate is, it needs a strategy. And this strategy will not be played out in the Sokomjinga platform.
Dr. Kanyenje says that this is too early to try, and of course, because we've got all 2025. Yes. But you can never say it's too early. You have to put your house in order, your ducks in a row. When you're talking about strategy, we talk about China having a strategy for the next 100 years.
I need to correct that. I said the noise just began last week. You understand? So we cannot right now just blame the country that now how come you don't have a strategy when people just announce their intentions? Of course, generally, stuff like this, by the time it's communicated, is something generally, for a number of reasons, many countries they would have thought through it. Now, that is not the way we do things in Kenya. But now that we know what we want, okay, can we perhaps reduce the Sokomjinga noise, okay, and actually start taking action? Because yes, it is political job, but it's not about the internal politics of a country only. Because when you start making noise internally, what happens is it exposes you in ways that is actually negative. Two, it's going to allow some politicians to make statements that may actually hurt our regional diplomacy. We know, I know Prof is a politician, but the difference between you and some of your friends is at least you have understanding of international relations. The same statements are the ones that made us suffer, or at least contributed to some of the difficulties we have experienced in regional diplomacy, because statements made by politicians who are not representing government position, okay, but then they're going to be interpreted sometimes by regional countries as, is Kenya trying to say this? How come they're acting as if they're so entitled? Because it doesn't look good when you actually look entitled. You understand? Yeah. You have to go to the region with a sense of humility, but at the same time also leadership. You can demonstrate that confidence, and so that's why we need to mute some of this Sokomjinga noise. It is good that the country, or at least the political divide, seems to be converging, around the same idea with regard to the Kenya's candidature and time. But then that noise should be somewhere in the boardrooms, okay, so we can actually, and parliament, so we can plan and then have a strategy. Those parliamentarians, the ones who have networks within the region, they can use their own networks to try and advance that. Kenya is the diplomatic capital, or when it comes to many representations from around the world. Almost every other country has representation in Kenya. If it's not an embassy, at least at the United Nations Environmental Program, So Kenya has that access that other countries in the region actually do not have. But then how best are we going to use it within the African context? And as we mentioned here, this is the time for East Africa. What is our strategy for East Africa? Because charity begins at home. We have to be accepted in the region first before we are going to be accepted by others. And so if we can't do a diplomacy and we're accepted in the region, then it's going to be a challenge. I'm going to claim that maybe the election was rigged because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No. These are ours to lose. And, we have a task on our hands.
Okay, Peter Kagwanja, on the issue of the lag and time, especially when you're talking about the G21, it's taken, a glacial slowness for this country, or for Africa as a continent, to be having a seat at the table of G20, now with the G21. It really goes to show also the perception of then the global community with the African Union. Is our voice being lent into those tables with any seriousness? And why would we be embraced later in the day as maybe an afterthought? Oh, by the way, African Union needs to be in the G21, but how come we've never even considered that? I mean, what does it really goes to show? That's the first question. Then again, could we also get a scorecard of Musa Faki and some of the challenges he had actually to really, contend with his leadership? So much fragmentations, flare-ups, coups all over. Questions have been raised regarding also, the voice of the African Union in regard to these coups and how to stem these coups as well. Were they overwhelmed as an institution?
I think I'll leave some of the question to Mustafa. He's the globetrotter, and has had a lot of smoothing with the experts out there. For us, we've been here and Sokomjinga.
The Sokomjinga politics.
Prof always plays down his abilities and the spaces that he occupies.
He's playing some reverse psychology here.
But let's say it's not a brainer that the African Union is the most powerful body on the continent. And it is also one of the most powerful bodies on the global south.
Yes.
The African Union is also one of the most influential bodies in the United Nations.
Yes.
Reason being that from the beginning, in the 1950s, the times of Kwame Nkrumah and his followers, and his age generation that time, Africa projected itself as one country rather than these fragmented countries. It is the best that we should do, not to project Africa as Djibouti or Gambia or Congo or Egypt. We are all one. And the perception of Africa and us as one country is to our advantage. And it is itself helping the world to reorganize itself and the structure. So a reformed African Union has one common development agenda, Agenda 2063. And therefore the role of the new leader is basically to lead Africa to one economic agenda. Two, the African Union is conceived as one country representing these other countries, and therefore its voice is really heard in the G20. G7 has not managed to ignore the African Union. African Union has a seat, or observer, or whatever you want to describe it, it is in the G7. African Union is in the Belt and Road Initiative of China. It's actually a core player in the BRI.
So why G7? And then you are an observer, you're like just a fly on the wall.
No, you're not a fly on the wall. I mean, this is really the way Africans become cynical about themselves. You are a substantive, and Africa is represented in the G7 by 3 heads of state from the 3 corners at any one time. Uhuru Kenyatta has been there twice, representing Africa. Thabo Mbeki has been there, to the best of my knowledge, 2 times. Obasanjo was there. So they take the best of the African brains. Remember, if you think of Africa as countries, then this is the wrong debate you are in. If you think of Africa as one country the way I do, then it is not about Africa being a gadfly or a fly in the wall. The truth of the matter is that we're there. Look at the debate on the veto, the reform of the African of the United Nations system. Africa is actually giving the lead. The Swatini, Zrueni consensus that in Africa you don't have to give the veto to South Africa, Egypt, or anybody. The veto will be the African veto, and therefore it is going to rest within the African Union, and it is beginning to become practical. And China and others are beginning to adjust to this reality. We are looking at a body that is beginning to become what Nkrumah had envisioned it, what Nyerere had envisioned it as the United States of Africa. To compete with the United Socialist Republic that time, United States of America that time, and China that time. Because to be influential globally, you need territory, you need population, and you need economic gravitas. Kenya cannot master that globally. Nigeria cannot master that globally. So you need population. Africa is now the most populous part of the world today. If you are watching Worldometer. If you go to Worldometer now, we're the most populous part of the world. Seen as a country, we are, followed by India, and China is now number 3 by today, if you look at Worldometer. Now, if you take Africa as a country, then our influence is huge. What is our secretariat? What would be our state house? It is essentially the African Union. So, and this is why it is the battleground of huge geopolitics. The Fakir you have talked about was basically, I must say this, was basically a French project to ensure that it has huge impetus or influence in the African Union. What has it done to us? Backlash within the French territories, coups, and so on and so forth. Now America is pushing to get China's footprint out of erased out of Africa. What is the focus? The African Union and key pillars of the African Union, South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria. Now that's why in the headline today, the frying president is about this new diplomacy of getting the pro-American leaders moving around the continent. That will be said. So that point is made. It is worthy for Kenya to go and fight for the leadership of the African Union, because you become automatically a global leader. And if we are at the helm of the African Union, then Kenya is no longer the country you think about. It is going to be the country giving direction to Africa in terms of economic development, in terms of reform of the global system, the reform of the global economy, and reform of everything that matters to us. Now, where are we going wrong? We are going on because we are rigging this game. We are rigging this game because we are not approaching it strategically, as they say. Why? Raila Odinga and Obasanjo simply sprint forward before the whistle is blown. Why?
jumping the gun.
And what does this do? It prevents Kenya from having a sober debate of who among us in this republic is best placed to challenge Jakaya Kikwete of Tanzania, to challenge the leadership of Djibouti, to challenge possibly Abdallah Hamdok of Sudan, to challenge the powerful leader from Rwanda. What's her name? The former foreign minister of Rwanda, very, very powerful, to challenge the former vice president of Uganda, who is also a candidate, and possibly to challenge Mariam Desaren of Ethiopia, because these are the candidates we have in the region. So you do a sober analysis of the candidates in the region and who have an advantage over the others, and then you put your best foot forward. We are not doing that. We are now doing our own internal ethnic and partisan politics.
The Sokomjinga politics.
Rather than looking at the African terrain as a separate terrain from Sokomjinga, Mukoyo market in Muranga, or the other market, Mwembe Tayari in Mombasa. We are doing the Mwembe Tayaris here. The truth of the matter is that we have two leading candidates in this country. It's Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. These are the two leading candidates that we have. Now, put against Jakaya Kikwete, who is best positioned to win this game. Put against Abdallah Hamdok, who is best to win in this country. Put against Mariam Desaren of Ethiopia, who is best to win this game. If Ethiopia were to put Desaren, or if Desaren was to put his papers, who would win? Then you ask the fundamental question. If we have, let's say, Uhuru Kenyatta and Jakaya Kikwete as the competitors in the region, what stand do we have, given that Tanzania has dual citizenship or a membership of SADC, which is a winning bloc, and the East African community, and Kenya has only the SADC. How do we make our candidate East African community? How do we and then we have Djibouti, which can put a candidate, has put a candidate before, has given us a run for our money. Yes. How do we ensure that if a candidate comes from Djibouti, we win the SADC bloc? Now, this is a deeper game than just going to have the MP for Karachuonyo, the MP for Mathioya, or the MP for Kirifi, Musambweni, and elsewhere, spending 5 minutes over the television saying who is the best candidate, who is not. Kenya need to have a sober debate about whether we want this seat or we want to waste our airtime, our money, and our resources and looking like clowns. This is a serious game we need to play the way we played with the United Nations Security Council seat. Now, in terms of Raila Odinga,
just hold on.
No, let me finish this, because we're talking about candidates. I will not talk about the candidate. I will just talk about Raila Odinga. Okay. Within the African continent, he's doing very well. Why? One, he's a former prime minister, so he's a peer. Two, he has had the opposition, therefore he has a position in Africa which can be a double-edged sword. That for those who like sober, non-confrontational politics, they might have a beef with him, but those who want a reformed African continent, they might go for him. Three, he is a peacemaker. He has been to Cote d'Ivoire and other African countries. Cote d'Ivoire was a big issue when he flew there, and he's not a newcomer to African Union. He's, until the government of Kenya decided to do what it did, he was still heading the infrastructure on the continent. The topmost agenda, the agenda that created NEPAD, the agenda that created the African Union, infrastructure capacity. So it's very, very important. And here we are talking about a person who has peerage. The symbol of Olusegun coming around was basically to signal that this is a person who has a continental appeal. And in many, many circles, he's considered one of the leading Pan-Africanists in the region. So we have that. And when you look at Uhuru Kenyatta, what are we talking about? We're talking about a person who has mediated conflict in Congo successfully. He's still the chair of the Great Lakes Consensus, or that forum, which is now broking peace, Rwanda, Burundi, and so on. And we're talking about Ethiopia, what he has done. We are talking about the way he managed the issue in Somalia to ensure that Kenya and Somalia do not go to war and that Somalia itself transit to peace. That is an achievement. And therefore, Kenya is not short of candidates and capacities. What we are short of is level-headedness to do our job.
I wanted just to latch on the issue of Uhuru Kenyatta, because we've already seen that President William Ruto has graciously elected to give Uhuru Kenyatta that diplomatic state. Yes. We're talking about the regional lex that he's been trying to fund, brokering peace around DR Congo, the shuttle diplomacy that we've seen, going to South Africa, even Sudan at the end of the day. Why wouldn't he hoist him and push even further for the AU job other than Raila Odinga, because he started? Why can't you just finish the job? That would be the question. Why would you be hoisting Raila Odinga for, or endorsing Raila Odinga for that particular position?
Let's be clear. William Ruto has not pronounced himself on this.
He's not really pronounced himself on that particular
front. Not at all. He has not said anything.
No.
This is not even something he has ventured into.
Okay, but if you see the dogs barking,
the owner is near.
The dogs are backed. Right? Do they just bark? That's what I'm asking. Right? He's not pronounced himself officially on this. He's not. I agree. But the dogs have barked. What would that say?
The dogs may be seeing...
Or if at all not, then... okay, let me just leave it to you say.
The dogs may be seeing their own things, you know. So please.
Leave the owner out of this.
But you come and quell the dogs as well if they're barking, isn't it? Yeah, you hush them down.
Sometimes they're hungry. You know, sometimes dogs bark when they're hungry. So you can come out and give it something. It happens all the time. Now, I was actually going to say what Prof has just mentioned, you know, that the president has not pronounced himself on this. And so far, publicly, the former president has not announced that he is running for the seat. Okay. Yeah, so we cannot be accusing the president of endorsing one person when he hasn't, you know, or the other one why he's not being fronted when he's not publicly announced his interest.
But he's just listed him as one of the candidates, or one of the prospective? Or where? So one will actually really...
No, this...
What I did was basically to list potential candidates for the region,
prospects. Okay.
Given the criteria we had set earlier, peerage, academic qualification, experience, and all that. And I said from the north, we have Abdallah Hamdok from Sudan. Yes. We have Aida Mariam Desaren of Ethiopia.
Also, those are prospects.
No, they have not even announced that they are going to stand up. But when the East African region is taking stock of its best, this is what we are going to put.
Best foot forward.
If Kenya is to get its best foot forward, it's not about rigging the game. It is about literally focusing on the best warrior for this particular fight. That's it.
All right, just continue.
Yes, and of course, the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, you know, is very highly qualified. In fact, many would dare probably say, some may disagree, that if there was such a thing as the United States of Africa, and Uhuru ran for it in 2022, he may actually have won the presidency because he was increasingly, extremely popular, probably one of the most popular presidents on the continent. But perhaps not at home, but on the continent, you know, in a very long time. So, of course, he's also very qualified. But again, he has not announced that his interest, and neither has that been a discussion that has been public. And so, the question, and where I would like to agree with Prof here too, is what he has highlighted is potential competition. You know, when you're going to war, you also have to make an assessment potentially of what challenges you're going to face. But what is more important is you need to take stock of what you need to be able to get there. And yes, this discussion is important and may be interesting to both the national as well as regional audience. But what is going to be important beyond today's discussion is, can we sit down then as a country and actually start planning? Now, Raila Odinga has continental, you know, ambitions. Some people who become president of the continent, some of them were inspired by his activism. And I think it's a little bit unfair to present his CV in a cartoon as the expert in Mandamano alone. Okay. As an expert in Mandamano. Yeah, that is way below the belt. That's literally in the knees. As in
no, it's right above
yes.
the knee.
It's slightly above the knee. That is terrible, you see. But so there are many people who've come to power who have been inspired, and there is no doubt that the continent needs a change in direction. But also the continent needs someone who cannot be a puppet. Part of the challenge especially, and with no pun intended, to demean, smaller countries of the continent, is those people who've served in important positions representing the continent that are coming from smaller countries. Sometimes they may have the name, they may have peerage, but their countries are just way too small and they have too little influence to be able to make an impact on a global stage, and they're not listened to. And that is the danger that we'll also have suffered had, our friendly country Djibouti perhaps assumed that, seat. You saw the work we did at the United Nations Security Council. Kenya was very respected as a result of that. I doubt if a smaller country would actually have been able to do that. There's confidence that comes with being Kenya, or at least being among the key players coming from Egypt, Kenya, South Africa, or Nigeria, that other countries you do not have. So this makes us pretty much the front runner, so to speak. But the noise is not helping, internal noise is not helping, because it does not send a very good picture. It creates jealousy on one end around East Africa, the way it does, because they think that Kenyans were not very humble people, we're very boastful, we are entitled, Two, we also lose the sense of direction when it comes to developing appropriate strategies to be able to start advancing this that is going to be multifaceted in terms of approach, so that we actually assume this position. The next 4 to 8 years, at the time which the next, AU Commission chairperson is going to have, are going to be critical for the continent. Africa has become the new theater for global geopolitics. Even just in the recent conflict, you could see how much the West and the East have been trying to actually court the African Union in many gatherings, global gatherings, economic, security, political, the A is represented. And so the leadership of the AU, the nature of it, that is going a Pan-Africanist person who understands the interests of Africans, is going to be critical if actually Africa's fortunes have to change in the next 4 to 8 years. If we get something like what we've had in the last few years, then it's going to be extremely challenging. The continent is more in a mess today than it was 8 years ago, and that we can agree. You see, there are revolts everywhere. There is threat for state collapse. And so we need someone who's respected, but also going to be able to mobilize other leaders and African institutions to ensure we can provide African solutions to African problems.
And so we have the question of Musa Faki, because we're talking about the tenure, he's exiting. We need also to look at his scorecard. How has he performed so far amid so many challenges that were in the African continent, with the blow-ups of the eruptions of coups, one after the other, the issue of drought management as well. Many countries, especially in the Horn of Africa, that was exacerbated. You've seen many really dying from hunger, and just the specter of it still with us. We're talking about the effects of climate change. IGAD as well has not really been up to scratch in so many fronts, so to speak. Many people question also the effectiveness of that particular governmental body. But let's just focus on some of the challenges he's had to really, contend with, and how he really came through. Did he really pass muster?
Yeah, Diban, I think I haven't really looked at the scorecard, so to speak, of Musa Faki. Just very generally, my opinion is that Africa Union has performed dismally over the last 3 or 4 years. The gravitas with which the Africa Union used to have and speak up to issues, I think we saw that shine disappearing during Musa Faki's time. The mess that we are seeing in West Africa today should not have been that much. It was going to be messy in West Africa anyway, but what we are seeing is a lot more because of the Africa Union seem not to have put its foot forward firmly first. With the coups that are happening in those areas, you know, if we compare with the coup that happened in Egypt, you know, with Al-Sisi coming to power and what we are seeing, you know, totally different ways that the AU actually responded to that. And I think Africa has been bullied over the last 5 years a lot, and especially in the last 3 years by Europe. Especially by Europe. And we see a very weak Africa Union responding to the challenges of this bullying. Look at the DRC. DRC has become worse today. In fact, DRC today is worse off than it was some few years back. And Africa Union should have taken a lot more stance on what is happening in the DRC. This is not to say that Musa Faki has not done certain things well. I think he's done certain things well. Is the trading, I can't remember the exact word, the trading, the Pan-African, having Africa as one trading bloc. I think that has, he's pushed for that, and it's something that he can say that he did it, of course, with the pushing of the African heads of states. But otherwise, I think the performance has been lackluster, in my view. Moving forward, what Africa Union needs is the vitality of leaders like Raila Odinga. Jakaya Kikwete, Professor Kagwanja said, Jakaya Kikwete is immensely popular across Africa. If Raila Odinga is going to run against Jakaya Kikwete,
it's a no-brainer.
Then we will be in trouble. And therefore, then we need to put in place a strategy.
Aren't you selling a strategy?
Yes.
You are selling a strategy as well on this forum when you try and project that regionally they're watching.
No, no.
Like, oh yeah, well, you go for it, go for broke.
No,
I'm just saying.
We're just cautioning Kenya against the Sokomjinga thing with the Africa Union a chairmanship position. And I mean, this Kenyan exceptionalism thing, I think we need to outgrow this.
Yes.
Yeah, and
the big brother syndrome.
That's true.
Around the region. Correct. Okay, lastly, even as we close the chapter of the African Union, I wanted to just dial back. I think even just growing up, seeing the figure of Muammar Gaddafi and the African Union, I mean, there was so much import of power that was brought to, you know, those photos and pictures of Muammar Gaddafi and this quest of having the African, the United States of Africa, and how the powers from without the continent were focusing on Africa, the demise, so to speak, of Libya, the way it is right now, and that particular quest, because he had a passion with his Green Book, what he did for Libya. He had also a vision for Africa, and he was rallying African people. He was rallying, pouring money to make sure that at least we have a united Africa. But as the world as it is right now, they will never want to see a united Africa. Could we dial back to the African Union of Muammar Gaddafi? Was he at some point also the chairman of that particular seat? No, he's never been. No. Yeah, but he seemed like he was. You see, even from my perception, that he looked like he was the chairman, right? Could you just talk about that? Then we take a short break. We go to other issues as well.
I think we need to focus attention on the African dream. The African dream of has been changing over time, and of course there are questions of how it can be achieved, and there have been differing opinions on how. Now, of course, you've got to go back. I don't want to go to the deep history of George Padmore, people like Dubois and others, but if we start from the continent here, the lead voice was Kwame Nkrumah. And he reduced his African dream, which is widely shared, and the most widely shared in a book, Africa Must Unite. What he did not say that if they does not unite, what happens? It perishes. So for Nkrumah, he did not give Africa an option. You have to unite. And some of these people were very serious in what they were doing. his major challenge at that time was how do you unite continental black Africa with the Arab Africa. He went to Egypt and married the relative, or I think a sister or a daughter of the president of Egypt at Nasser, and that's Nkrumah for you. He was very, very serious about that project. The next person who comes after is Gaddafi, and Gaddafi comes because he also reduced his thought into writing, and unlike Nkrumah, he spent the resources of his state to realize the African dream. So Gaddafi himself almost to a man bankrolled the reform of the African Union from the Organization of African Unity to what we have today. And this is personal experience from Pretoria. The other country that invested heavily is South Africa. South Africa hired the rest of the African experts, including myself and others that I know of, to sit in Pretoria and think about the Africa and how it is going to look like. And we sat there for years, basically trying to make the African dream a reality. And Thabo Mbeki told us what we are doing. We are African Renaissance, literally recreating Africa as the leader and winner of the 21st century. That the 21st century must be African century. And we bought into that, and this is what give the African Union the impetus that it had at the beginning, and which we are now talking about in very nostalgic terms, about that Africa that used to be working. Now, what has happened is that is the rollback. From 2014, more specifically, the world changed. And the world changed because the power started gravitating and shifting to the south. China, India, Brazil, and now resurgent Russia challenging the West. And the West got scared. And if you read the United States security strategy of 2022, you are going to see the position that was put. And the main target of this new geopolitical onslaught is the African continent. And the coming of Moussa Faki and others is part of that strategy, particularly by the EU and others. And I'm saying this, because it is the truth. And if it is not, I wouldn't say it. Now, as we speak, and I agree with what Mustafa said, that Congo is the new focus of this new assault. Why is it? Because cobalt, the main driver of this technology is in the Congo.
We'll come to Congo.
Not Congo alone. I'm not just giving example of the Congo. You now go to the Sudan, which has a lot of gold. You can see the chaos. So eventually what we are saying is that Africa has to have a strategy on how to win this geopolitical onslaught. Because if you don't win that new geopolitical onslaught, we are just going to be what we have been, hewers of wood and drawers of water in the international system.
All right. So we need to take away the Sokomjinga politics from this particular question out of the chairmanship of the commission as it is. We've heard from our panelists, and we continue pace. We shall still be latching on the African Union, also on the tricks that happened behind the scenes, especially between Somalia and Ethiopia, where the allegations of security detail of Ethiopia was trying to prevent the head of state of Somalia from attending some of the sessions of the African Union summit. We shall tell you more about that, and also the development from South Africa.